Your Bibles to Revelation chapter 14. Revelation chapter 14. We have noted at the beginning of every service related to this chapter that chapter 14 contains 6 scenes of hope. Number 1, the destiny of the 144,000, verses 1 through 5. Number 2, the proclamation of the eternal gospel. God uses an angel to do this in this particular passage in verses 6 and 7. The prediction of the destruction of Babylon. And that's a scene of hope because Babylon has been an oppressive nation since its inception, and I would go all the way back to the Tower of Babel. But Babylon will be destroyed after it's rebuilt in the future. Then number 4, the doom of the beast's worshipers, verses 9 through 12. And then the blessing upon the martyrs, number 5. The martyrs of the tribulation, verse 13. And then we're coming now to the judgment harvest of Armageddon, verses 14 through 16. And I'm going to need, I think, 2 lessons to cover that. So let's pray and then read our section. Father in heaven, we thank you for gathering us together so that we can learn of your purpose and plan. And we know the blessing of Revelation 1:3, that blessed is the one who reads and understands the words of this prophecy. So may we fulfill that command by studying everything in Revelation, including what we look at today. And may you bless us in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, verse 1 of chapter 14. John says, "Then I looked, and behold, the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his name and the name of his Father written on their forehead. And I heard a voice from heaven like the sound of many waters, like the sound of loud thunder. And the voice which I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps. And they sang a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and the elders. And no one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been purchased from the earth. These are the ones who have not been defiled with women, for they have kept themselves chaste. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes." So following the Lamb is discipleship. "These have been purchased from among men as firstfruits to God and to the Lamb. And no lie was found in their mouths. They are blameless." So they're men of integrity. It doesn't mean they're sinless people. "I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven, having an eternal gospel to preach to those who live on the earth." It's almost like last call, isn't it, here? The judgment's getting close, and God continues to hold out his mercy through the gospel. And notice, to every nation and tribe and tongue and people, because God wants not just Jews, but Gentiles saved. "And he said with a loud voice, 'Fear God.'" And didn't we hear that this morning? And was that you, Mark? We should fear God. There you go. That was biblical. "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and the springs of water." Waters. So notice, we have earth worshipers today. They'll be doing it then. But he says worship the creator of it all, not the creation. So Romans 1:18 through 25 issue. "And another angel, a second one, followed, saying, 'Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great,'" which actually doesn't fall until the 7th bowl judgment that's coming up from this point, but it's proleptic, it's about to happen. "She who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality." And then another angel, a third one, followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast in his image and receives a mark on his forehead or his hand," that's what happened at the end of chapter 13, the mark of the beast, "he will also drink of the wine of the wrath of God." So here we have wine connected to wrath. We're getting ready to see the grape juice of God's enemies poured out, like blood being poured out. That's coming up soon. "So they'll drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger." So it is full strength. It's going to happen huge. And that's why Jesus will have a sickle, but it's a sharp sickle. You see this intensity of the judgment in this chapter. And he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, because the lake of fire is eternal. And they have no rest day or night, those who worship the beast in his image and those who receive the mark of his name. Here is the perseverance. Remember hupomone? Stick-to-itiveness. I went to see Dawn in the hospital right before she went home, and she brought that word up, stick-to-itiveness, as if it was a modern English word that I was like, hey, you were listening. Stick-to-itiveness. So this perseverance, you're hanging in there, you're walking with Christ no matter what the circumstances. And what do? They keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. It's really a Hebrews 12, 1 through 3, focusing on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who with the joy set before him endured the cross and despised the shame and sat down at the right hand of God. So consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you won't grow weary and lose heart. And they're doing that, and we need to do it today, and they will definitely need it in the tribulation. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, "Write, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, so that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow with them." So they'll be rewarded for their faithful deeds on earth, and one day their labor on earth will cease, as ours will as well. So now, we're to that sixth scene of hope. The sixth scene is the judgment harvest of Armageddon. Again, I think this is proleptic. At this point of this being revealed in the tribulation, it's looking forward to what will happen right close to the end of the tribulation, but it's looking at it at this point as a great judgment related to the Jewish harvest. So verse 14, "Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like a son of man, having a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand." So John sees an individual in this vision who is described four ways. Number one, he's seated on a white cloud. Two, he's like a son of man, and the word like is there, like a son of man. Three, he has a golden crown on his head. Number four, he has a sharp sickle in his hand. So the question is, who is this? I think it's Jesus Christ, especially because of the second description, one like a son of man. So let's validate this from the Scripture. Let's see if this description fits Jesus Christ. So the first one, he is seated on a white cloud, which indicates, where is he coming from? From heaven. In both Matthew 24:30 and Matthew 26:64, Jesus said, "You will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." So where is he now? He ascended to heaven after the death, burial, and resurrection. He's seated at the right hand of God in heaven, in the throne room of God. He'll come back from there. So coming in the clouds describes his coming from heaven. Now, the color of the cloud is important. It's a white cloud, which I think indicates righteousness and purity. It's similar to the saints wearing white robes in Revelation 6:11, 7:9, 7:14. Again, a picture of righteousness and purity. So Jesus being seated on a white cloud emphasizes his purity and righteousness, which qualifies him to judge. Number two, the second description is that the one John saw was one like a son of man. Well, back in Revelation 1:13, since you're in Revelation, turn back there. Go to 1:12. Remember, John is exiled to the island of Patmos in the 90s AD. I think he was writing Revelation in 95 AD. And Jesus appeared to him in glory. after his resurrection. Because Jesus died in 30 AD, so decades later, Jesus appears to John. And what a relief for being, during a time when you're exiled for your faith, to see Jesus face to face. So the same exact words, like a son of man, is found in Revelation 1:13. But 1:12, John says, I turned to see the voice who was speaking with me. And having turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And in the middle of the lampstands, I saw one like a son of man. I thought he was the son of man. What's this like thing? Hold on. Clothed in a robe reaching to the feet and girded across his chest with a golden sash. And the description goes on. Amazing description of the Lord in that chapter. So where is the first place one like a son of man is used in the Bible to refer to Jesus? People looking to their spouses. Who said Daniel? Mark's on his A game today. Yeah, Daniel 7, 13 and 14. Now remember, you have the description of the 4 beasts in this chapter. And what were the beasts? In a negative sense, the lion, Jesus is called the lion of the tribe of Judah. That's a good use, but Satan's also the lion who seeks to devour. The first beast was Babylon, who's a lion, and then what was next? The lopsided bear with meat in its teeth, the Medo-Persian Empire, and then you had the leopard, the winged leopard, which is Greece, and then you had what? The beast with iron teeth to describe the 4th empire, which is Rome. And Jesus came in the 4th empire at his first advent, was rejected, so he'll come back to a revived Roman Empire at his second advent. So Daniel 7, 13 and 14, I kept looking in the night vision. So here's the blessing of this. Jesus, his kingdom will replace all the kingdoms of man, represented by those 4 kingdoms. Remember back in Daniel 2, the statue had the same 4 nations, but now it's a statue. And it said at the end of that, remember the iron was Rome? But that smiting stone came from heaven and smashed the feet of the statue, but the whole statue went up like chaff. So all the nations in rebellion against God will be destroyed. And what does Jesus do at his second coming? Does he bring in all the evil nations to coexist? No. He takes them all out and sets up his kingdom as the absolute monarch. And he will rule. Amen? Are we waiting for that? And so that's the hope. It's not hope like maybe. It's a confident thing. It's not a carrot that we can never grab. It's put out there to say it's going to happen soon. I know God's definition of soon is different than ours, but it's still going to happen. So Daniel said in Daniel 7, 13 and 14, I kept looking in night visions, similar to John looking at a vision. And behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. Is this not Revelation 14? He came up to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. That's God the Father. So when you go to Revelation chapters 4 and 5, you'll see the Father seated on the throne, and Jesus, the Lamb, slain, but he's now standing as if slain. He's resurrected, and he walks up to the Ancient of Days on the throne and takes the scroll and starts breaking the seals, which is really a title deed to the earth. And he will slowly begin through these 3 series of judgments to rain his wrath down on earth and take back the land and establish his kingdom in the land. As Psalm 37 said today in our study, the humble will inherit the land. Israel will inherit the land. And then Jesus said the same thing in Matthew 5. The humble will inherit the land. He's coming out of Old Testament, especially Psalm 37. And now he's going to give the land to Israel. The inheritance is almost there. So with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. He comes up to the Ancient of Days, the Father, and was presented before him. And to him, Jesus the King, the Son of Man, was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom. I'd ask, is that a kingdom? But pretty clear, right? Remember Isaiah 60? We just read it in the first hour. The glory will shine upon his people, the glory of his kingdom. His house, his temple will be glorious. And Jesus will rule a millennial temple, in a millennial temple. And notice how not just Jews, but all the peoples, nations from every language might serve him. And we studied recently Psalm 87. Remember, all those from the nations that believe in the Lord are said to have been born in Zion. They're physically born somewhere else, but Zion is their destiny, which is Jerusalem. His dominion is an everlasting dominion. See, he replaces all those temporary evil kingdoms of man. It won't pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. So we have this phrase here in Hebrew. It's Aramaic in this chapter. Part of Daniel is Aramaic. It's kavar anash. Bar in Aramaic is son. In Hebrew, it's Ben. You ever heard of Ben? Ben Dawid, son of David. But bar is the Aramaic. Hebrew uses the same letters as Aramaic, so you're reading it, but it's not the same language. Probably if you knew Hebrew really well, you could do Aramaic, you could learn it pretty quick. And then Anosh is the word for man, son of man. Ben Adam would be the Hebrew, son of man. But not here. He's dealing with these Gentiles, so he is using Aramaic. And it says, kavar Anosh, one like a son of man. It puts the like in the Aramaic as well. So what does it mean that Jesus was like a son of man? Now let me give you some options here. Some think this means that Jesus was truly human. Would you agree he is? Absolutely. With like a son of man, highlighting that he was born of a virgin woman, Mary, and not born of a man, Joseph. In other words, Jesus was born through a miraculous conception by means of the Holy Spirit. And that comment was from the view of Dr. Alan Ross. Some scholars say Jesus being like a son of man simply means that Jesus is not a son of man in the sense of just a mere human being, but much more than that. So he is human, like a son of man, but he's much more. One scholar said of Daniel 7:13, the kavar anash, one like a son of man, he said, Jesus Christ is called one like a son of man, kavar anash, which emphasizes his true humanity as opposed to the kingdoms of men that are compared to four beasts earlier in the chapter. Christ is not only true humanity physically, but he's also the ideal man in his character. And I would even add in his representation. So being like a son of man reveals that Jesus is true humanity, no doubt. But unlike fallen mankind, he's perfect humanity without sin. Y'all seeing how they're working with this? It's not saying he's not human. You know, Paul speaks of Jesus in a similar way in Romans 8. Remember Romans 8:3? For what the law could not do, weak as it was through the flesh, God did, sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh. And as an offering for sin, he condemned sin in the flesh. So it says in the likeness of sinful flesh. So was he a sinner? No, but he was human, but sinless, we know for sure in other passages. But he's like one of us in that he's human, but he's far greater. He's without sin. I think that's what he's doing here with this like a son of man. So this indicates that although Jesus is true humanity, he is perfect, sinless humanity. And that is validated in other passages. In Hebrews, he's tested and tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. Dr. John Niemela did a lot of work on Daniel 7. In his view, he says this, Daniel 7:13 is a return to the heavenly court, apparently just after the pronouncement of judgment upon the four beasts, or the fourth beast, the Roman Empire. This passage describes the Ancient of Days awarding Christ the kingdom. The Aramaic phrase, kavar anash, like son of man or man-like, lacks the article. So there's no article there before the words, like a son of man. So the focus is upon his human appearance in contrast with the four beasts that preceded. The qualitative usage is in keeping with the simile introduced by like. Kavar Anash looks like he descended from man, not like the four descendants of beasts. Despite the lack of an article, everything here points to Kavar Anash as being a divine being. See, and isn't Jesus God who became flesh? He's the God-man. John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and then Kai Theos Ein Ho Logos, the Word was God, then 1:14, the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us, and we beheld His glory. The one full of grace and truth. So interesting comments on one like a son of man. Another writer said concerning like a son of man in Revelation 1:13, Hebrew and Aramaic use the expression to mean a human being, but Jesus used it as a designation for himself based on the particular use in Daniel 7:13 and 14. So what he's saying is, when he appears to John in Revelation 1:13 and calls himself the son of man, he's going directly back to Daniel, and I agree. In that text, one like a son of man, a representative for the saints who suffer before receiving the kingdom, receives the right to rule eternally. See, I think history, we say the primary meaning of history is salvation or soteriological. I disagree. I think it's doxological. I think it's the glory of God, with salvation being a subset of that. So the whole purpose of human history is the glory of God, and Jesus has the right to rule, and he has proven that through history. But he's also proven man does not have the right to rule or the capacity to do it correctly. Amen? Do you think I'm the best shepherd that's ever been produced, even better than Jesus? Please say no. If you say yes, I got to talk to you afterward. He's the chief shepherd. He's the ultimate one. Everything, every authority he established in the Bible, underneath him, even believers are flawed. He is not. He's the ultimate everything. The ultimate, son of sometimes just means representative of. So if you're the Son of Man, he's the ultimate representative of the Father as the Son. And it also relates to his humanity, but I think also to his deity, because he's the God-man more than just a mere human being. So I think the title Son of Man relates to Christ's true sinless humanity, but also relates to his deity and kingship, since Christ, the Son of Man, the God-man, receives the kingdom from the Father. And we know the King is God in other passages, so you have to pull in a lot together. So, Jesus calls himself the Son of Man without like a Son of Man, just the Son of Man coming on the clouds in his Olivet Discourse, which is another connection back to Daniel 7. There it is on the slide, Matthew 24, 29, and 30. He says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, so at the end of the 7-year tribulation, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. Could be the tribes of Israel. And they, remember Zechariah, they'll mourn over the one they pierced. Some argue that it's also Gentile peoples. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky. Is that not Daniel 7? And what did Daniel get Jesus get when he comes with the clouds? What's next? The kingdom. What is Jesus saying? I'm going to bring in the kingdom. And he'll come with great power and great glory. Well, that's an understatement. Go to Matthew 26. Jesus again applies Daniel 7 to himself at his trial before the Jewish leaders, before he gets to Pilate in chapter 27. But in Matthew 26, yes, 59, long chapter. Let's start in, I got verse 64 on the slide, but let's start in verse 59. Now the chief priests and the whole council kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus. Let's leave it up to the old legal system of the world, right? so that they might put him to death. And they did not find any. By the way, in Deuteronomy, if you seek a penalty against somebody and you're a malicious witness, what did it say you had to do to the one if it's found out? You have to give him the punishment that he wanted on the other person. That's why I think in John 8, when the Pharisees want to stone this woman caught in adultery, well, there's some problems there. They're malicious witnesses. The text says that they were malicious, seeking to trap him. Oh, that's a violation of the law of Moses. And then they only bring the woman, not the man, another violation of the law, and all they want to do is trap Jesus, so they want her stoned to death. You need to be stoned now. And they all threw the stones down and went away. I think they knew the law. He was without sin, cast the first stone. Anyway. So now, boy, do they deserve death again. They didn't find any, even though many false witnesses came forward. But later on, two came forward and said, this man stated, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. He didn't say that. If you read John 2 carefully in the Greek, Jesus said to the Jews, you destroy this temple and I'll raise it in 3 days. Oh, it took 46 years to build this temple. I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about my temple. And you're going to kill me, and then I'll raise from the dead. So they twist his words. It never happens in court. You ever see how they try to damage somebody on social media? And you go back to the whole 30-minute discussion, and they just took 3 things out and spliced it together and totally changed it. Well, they're just completely butchering what he said. He didn't say that. Anyway, verse 62. The high priest stood up and said to him, do you not answer? What is this that these men are testifying against you? But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God. He is the living God, right? That you tell us whether you're the Christ or the Messiah, the anointed one, the Son of God. And I like Jesus' answer. He said, you said it yourself. In other words, yes, I am. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man, going back to Daniel, seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. And that infuriated them because they know Daniel 7 as well and what he is claiming. So God is going to judge this world through Jesus. This authority was delegated to Jesus by God the Father. John 5, 26 and 27, Jesus said, just as the Father has life in himself, even so he gave the Son also to have life in himself. Now verse 27, and he gave him authority to execute judgment because he is the Son of Man. And who is judging in Revelation 14? The Son of Man with a sharp sickle in his hand, who's going to swing that sickle to the earth and harvest this earth in great judgment, which we'll look at in great detail next week. So number 3, what else does Jesus have described about him? He has a golden crown on his head. So this golden crown indicates he's a king, and he's ready to assume his position as King of Kings and Lord of Lords from Revelation 19, and then establish his kingdom. Now, this is not a diadema crown. It's a Stephanos crown. It's a victor's crown in the New Testament, given as an award for victory. So Jesus had already shown during his first advent victory over Satan, right? Over his world system. And death itself through his death, burial, and resurrection. John 16:33, 1 Corinthians 15 about this bodily resurrection, and then Hebrews 2, 14 and 15. So all this qualifies him to judge this earth and replace Satan and his fallen kingdom with his millennial kingdom, the kingdom of God. So Jesus comes at his second advent as a victorious warrior who will rule after the judgment. But is he a warrior first? Yes, and then he rules as king. We'll look at this next week in detail. But remember, Isaiah 9:6 calls Jesus 4 things: Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, eternal Father, and Prince of Peace. However, mighty God in Hebrew, El Gabor, that word Gabor can be used in Isaiah for a warrior. Mighty is fine, he's powerful, but I think warrior hits it better because Isaiah presents the Messiah as a warrior who destroys his enemies. So Isaiah 9:6 calls him warrior God. And if you go there, the Jehovah's Witnesses always say mighty versus almighty and all that. It's not even the issue here in the Hebrew. Jesus is a warrior. And he's God. So he is deity, and don't tell me he's not. But you get to Isaiah 63, 1 through 4, and Isaiah says, who's this one coming at this glowing colors and his majestic apparel, but you're covered in red? Well, the Messiah answers back, says, I've been treading the winepress of the fierce wrath of God Almighty. And the blood of the grapes, namely the humans that he's trampling, that blood is sprayed all over my garment. Pretty violent, right? But great righteous violence will precede a kingdom of peace. And sometimes that's the only way it comes, right? Ultimately in history, that will be the only thing to end illegitimate, sinful violence of fallen man, is legitimate violence from Jesus and then setting up a kingdom rule. So you'll see this imagery in Isaiah 63, 1 through 4 next week, but it picks up the winepress of God's wrath, which is also Revelation 14:19 and Revelation 19:15. It's picked up in those two passages in Revelation right before the kingdom comes. Then Zephaniah 3:17, which is a passage dealing with Messiah's earthly kingdom rule in the future. Zephaniah 3:17 says, the Lord your God is in your midst. It's not in your heart or inside you, Bekerbek, in your midst. That's what Jesus was saying in Luke 17 when he told the Pharisees, the kingdom of God is not in your heart. Why would he tell the Pharisees that? He says the kingdom is in your midst because the king is here offering you the kingdom. And you say no? Well, then it'll come at the second advent. And then Zephaniah 3, I will be in your midst then. Finally, you'll accept me. So be very careful with that Luke 17. They pull half a verse out of context and say the kingdom's in your heart today. Has nothing to do with that if you read the whole chapter, especially those 4 verses in a row. So the Lord your God is in your midst, and what is he called? Some Bibles say a victorious warrior. However, I would translate it a warrior who saves, because the word salvation is there, Yasha. So he's a warrior who delivers. And when he comes back on the white horse, he'll deliver Israel from the enemy. And they're already saved from the penalty of sin. They've already believed in him, so they're calling on his name so that he'll come back and deliver them into the land. And he does that all by himself. He doesn't need help. He doesn't say, oh, give me 100 years to build an army. He does come back with the saints, right? The armies of heaven following him. But Isaiah 63 says, I tread the winepress alone. Alone, bad in Hebrew, by myself. I mean, didn't he kill 185,000 Assyrian troops by speaking it? So the broadsword comes out of his mouth in Revelation 19. That's his word. And he fells them with his speech. By the breath of his mouth, he fells the Antichrist. Remember 2 Thessalonians 2? And then it says he'll exult over you with joy. After the war and his defeat, he'll rejoice over his people. Deuteronomy 30 said that. I'll rejoice over you. When you return to me, I'll return to you, and then there'll be rejoicing. And he'll be quiet in his love, and he'll rejoice over you with shouts of joy. We celebrate the Messiah, but he celebrates the other way too. Happy to see us, right? Remember the prodigal son? The son walks away. He repents, comes back. The father receives him with joy, falls on his neck, holds a banquet, which is Isaiah 25, the kingdom banquet. And then this great celebration, it's the same idea. And Jesus will rejoice over his people restored. You know, when David, Adonijah is being crowned king, and Of course, David says, well, we better get Solomon crowned king right away because David's about to die. And they said you could hear the celebration of celebrating Solomon being anointed king. I don't know how many miles it was, but you could hear it. You probably feel the earth shaking. There's such excitement. Think of when we rejoice like this at the kingdom, how that's going to reverberate through the earth. Finally, righteousness. So now we come to description 4. So he's seated on a white cloud, having a golden crown on his head, and has a sharp sickle in his hand. So the 4th description is that he had a sharp sickle in his hand. And notice the sickle, a drepanon. A drepanon, a sickle, was a harvesting tool. And they'd use it to harvest grain. They've even used it in, well, I can say our day. Somebody probably in their teens here, would they know what a sickle is? Probably hadn't seen one. But you see pictures of them, is it the scythe? Or sometimes the handle was short, sometimes it was longer, with that long curved blade, and you would use it to... Remember the guys, I still see a neighbor, remember the old lawnmowers that have the little circular thing? And you just push it, there's no engine. And I almost want to go, hey, you want to borrow my mower? Because it's taken him forever to mow that yard with that thing. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. And now we got all these power mowers and side bag, and everyone's arguing over horsepower. But back in the day, that's what they used to harvest. Could you imagine? Look at what we have, all these John Deere tractors and what they do now. But they would harvest with these sickles. So Jewish people or a people of agriculture, they know what this means. It's prevalent in their history. Deuteronomy 16:9. You shall count 7 weeks for yourself, and you shall begin to count 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the standing grain. And God is providing a harvest. So there's the sickle in the Old Testament. It's also used metaphorically in the Old Testament for God's judgment. Joel 3, and we're going to go to Joel. We're going to spend a lot of time in Joel next week. But Joel 3:13, down below you see, God says, put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. And what is Revelation 14 saying? It actually says zeirino. It's more than ripe. So you know when something gets so ripe it withers? Because it's overripe? That's what he's saying in Revelation. So the harvest is ripe. Come, tread, for the winepress is full. So now we got a harvest, sickle, and a winepress once again. All of it found in Revelation 14. As they say, you will never understand Revelation in its fullness until you understand the Old Testament. Notice the vats overflow. I'll show you a winepress next week. So that they would even have when they're standing treading the grapes and there's this little canal. And they would even use plant material as a filter. Sometimes thorns would be all put together to filter it, and then it goes into these vats. So now the vat's full. What does that mean? Ooh, it's time to judge. Why? Their wickedness is great. Could there be any greater wickedness than at the end of the tribulation? It'll be at an all-time high. We'll look at the Joel passage next week, but Joel 3 clearly speaks of the sickle for a ripe harvest and the winepress as well, both symbols of God's judgment that are picked up in Revelation 14:15 through 20. Pardon me. So in Revelation 14:14, the sharp sickle is being used metaphorically for Jesus Christ's harvest of judgment on the earth. Pardon me. Clearing my throat is annoying on the recording because these microphones are so good. It is in stereo and very loud, so apologize. Greg, you can edit that part out. He's already up there working on it. So Revelation 14:15, another angel came out of the temple, crying out with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud. So there's an angelic being crying out to Jesus, the Son of Man, on the cloud, right? And he says to the Lord, put in your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come. because the harvest of the earth is ripe. So again, proleptic, this is going to be the Armageddon War, and then when he returns and defeats the enemy and goes into the kingdom with his people. So here, I already mentioned it, but the word ripe is zeirino. This word means fully ripe, something overripe, or something to the point of being withered. This is used when Jesus talks, John 15. Remember about bearing fruit and the branch that withers? It's that word. It's used 16 times in the New Testament. And it's never a positive thing. So the fruit is overripe or withered. And I've seen this. I have a loquat tree. Anyone have those? No one has a loquat tree in this room. No one's going to heaven in this room. Do y'all know what a loquat tree is? It's a Chinese fruit. Well, that freeze really did a number on it. That's 2 years in a row I hadn't had anything on it. But when it does produce fruit, you look for the color. It's big and green. And then it'll start going a little gold. And then when it's real nice and gold and they're fat, you better pull those, because you go a little longer, you go another week, and they start to shrivel. And they're so overripe, they're too sweet, and they're no good.
I got a fig. Am I good?
Yeah, John, you can come in. Because everyone will sit under his vine and fig tree, it says. So, so I think what this is saying is they've had more than enough time to respond, and the judgment's overdue. Because if this is toward the end of the tribulation, we're talking 6 years plus of that 7 years. And notice this angel comes out of the temple of God, which is the heavenly temple of God. There's a heavenly temple, there's an earthly temple, like Solomon's temple and what we're studying in the first hour. So he comes out of the dwelling of God, and this is where God the Father is seated on the throne in heaven, overseeing the judgment. And again, Jesus, the Lamb, will approach the Ancient of Days on the throne and is given the scroll with the seals to judge. So now we're in that third series of judgments. The seals are passed, the trumpets are passed, and now it's going into the bowl judgments. So the last time we saw the temple was in Revelation 11:19. That heavenly temple, if I'm correct on that, from this point it was back in Revelation 11:19, which is part of that heavenly scene in Revelation 11:15 through 19, when the seventh angel blows the seventh trumpet. So the blowing of the trumpet is the beginning of the last series of judgments. Remember, the seventh seal started the trumpets. The seventh trumpet starts the bowls, or what are called vial judgments. Not V-I-L-E, but V-I-A-L, like a vial. Or a bowl, that's fine. So the bowl judgments don't even begin till chapters 15 and 16 and occur at the last part of the tribulation, really late into the tribulation. So when the seventh angel blows his trumpet, back in chapter 11, that announces the culmination of God's judgment on the earth, bringing in the seven bowls. So in Revelation 11:19 it says, "And the temple of God which is in heaven was opened, and the ark of his covenant appeared in his temple. And there were flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder and an earthquake and a great hailstorm." So this angel in Revelation 14:15 comes out of that heavenly temple. And he's coming from the throne of God with the announcement to execute the final series of judgments. And Jesus, the Son of Man, is seated on that cloud above the earth, waiting for the order to begin the judgment. So the Father will give the order through this angel to Jesus, and then he does it. And make no mistake, this angelic being telling Christ to put in the sickle to harvest the earth is not a sense of a superior to an inferior. I mean, Jesus created the angels, Colossians 1:16 and 17. Here he's relaying an order from the throne of God the Father to God the Son. He's a messenger. Isn't that what angel means? In Hebrew and Greek, malach and angelos mean a messenger. Now, it can be an angelic messenger, it can also be a human messenger. Here it's an angel. And now the judgment is going to begin, which again relates to the final series of judgments, the bowl judgments, which we'll see in chapter 15 and 16 and occur very close to the final half of the 7-year tribulation. So verse 16, and then he who sat on the cloud, that's Jesus, swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was reaped. So Jesus swings the sickle to the earth was reaped in judgment, just prior to the establishment of his kingdom on earth. I think I'll probably get about as far as Matthew today. Hey, but it has 28 chapters, right? That was a joke. So turn to Matthew. Let's see. If I tell you to go to Matthew 13, do you promise not to read it yet? People come up at the end of a sermon. What did you say about Matthew 13? I started reading in verse 1 while you were talking. And hey, I love it that you're reading the scripture, but hang on. Just a little background of the 28 chapters of Matthew in a minute. Okay? So in chapters 1 and 2, they call it the pedigree of the king. He has a genealogy. Does that give him the right to the throne? Yes, because the genealogy has 14 generations. King David's name even adds up to 14 in Hebrew, and it's showing that he is the one in the line of King David. And the Davidic covenant of 2 Samuel 7 promised one in David's line who would rule. Jesus is the one. But not through Solomon down that way. He comes through Nathan, through Mary. And then you'll see the protection of the king in chapter 2. Well, the worship of the king is early when the Magi come in chapter 2 to bring gifts worthy of the king. And then at the end of that chapter, remember, God protects the Messiah as a boy, sends him to Egypt, and then when Herod dies, he sends him back to the land. And then you have the preparation of the king, Matthew 3 and 4, which John the Baptist prepares the way for the king. He announces Jesus the king, says, make straight paths for him. He's fulfilling Isaiah 40 and Malachi 3:1. And then in chapter 4, Jesus in his preparation is tested by the ruler of the world, the king with a little k of this world, Satan. And how does he do? You give him an A? How about an A+? So he can defeat Satan, and then he starts preaching the kingdom of heaven is at hand, Matthew 4:17, and then you get to the Sermon on the Mount, the actual preaching of the king. The most lengthy sermon he gave about the kingdom is Matthew 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount. And then in 8 through 10, you have the power of the king. So he does miracles to validate his message. That means he's a true prophet. What makes a prophet true is his words. Remember, Deuteronomy 13? But also his miracles can validate a true message, which he did. Remember, Isaiah 35 said the Messiah has to do miracles. Well, that'll prove who he is. Remember, the lame will leap like a deer, the blind will see, the deaf will hear, their ears will be unstopped. So he does miracles to validate his message, even sends the disciples out to preach the kingdom to the lost sheep of the house of Israel and empowers them with miracles to validate the message. Then in 11 and 12, you have the progressive rejection of the king. It really intensifies in chapter 11. And then in chapter 12 is the pinnacle, when he does a miracle by healing the demon-possessed man, and they said he did it by the power of the devil rather than the power of God. And Jesus said, well, if I cast out demons by the power of the Spirit, then the kingdom of heaven has come upon you. Not that the kingdom has been installed, but it's available if they'll believe in him. And then in 13 through 20, the program of the king. So he'll go into parables talking about preparing his disciples for the time of his absence, or what we call the period of delay before his second coming. And then you have the presentation of the king, Matthew 21 through 23. And remember, Jesus rides in on the donkey, Passover, to lay down his life, fulfilling Zechariah chapter 9. And then you have the prophecies of the king. So he gives his Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24 and 25, speaking of the prophetic future for Israel. And we just read some of that. And then He's got to do this, though. Matthew 26 through 28, he's got to die, go to the cross, be crucified for our sins, go into the grave, and then raise from the dead, Matthew 28. And that's where it closes with the Great Commission, go out and proclaim the message. I said in a few minutes, that was 4 minutes, right? So one of these, well, back to chapter 12. Where did I tell you to turn? 13? Okay. Well, back in chapter 12, you have that major rejection. So here's what I think is going on. In chapter 13, you have 8 parables, and this is my view of this. The first one, the parable of the sower coming out of Hosea. Remember, he went to plant Israel in the land in Hosea? Well, that's what he's come to do for Israel. He wanted the fourth soil. That was the place of blessing where he would establish Israel and they'd be fruitful. Sometimes I think parables, we try to make them stand on all fours and we read too much in them. So we have to be very careful that every single little letter isn't a whole theology of itself. Sometimes there's a major point he's getting to. But I think the parable of the sower is describing why Israel rejected him. Hey, I'm the sower. I sowed the word and they rejected it, the first 3 soils. The Calvinist tries to say, well, not saved, not saving faith, and then the Arminian says, well, he lost his salvation. He believed for a while, and then, no, I don't even think he's going there. They rejected my word, is what he's saying. And I wanted soil 4, which I didn't get. And I would have planted them in the land, Hosea. So, parable 1, and then the last parable, I don't have that one memorized. I have to look at it again. I think are a little different. They kind of bookend it. But I think it's parables 2 through 7 that describe a postponed kingdom. Because, hey, he said, after they committed the unpardonable sin, remember he said, this will not be forgiven in this age or the age to come. So this age is the present age. The age to come is the kingdom age. Jesus was a dispensationalist. He believed in 2 administrations there. As they say, you can be called a dispensationalist or an administrationalist. If that's even stick-to-itiveness, I just made another word. So I think those parables of the postponed kingdom are parable 2 through 7. And if you look at it that way, I think that he's describing, since I've been rejected in Matthew 12, the kingdom will come. I said in Matthew 21:43, remember what he said? The kingdom will be taken from you, Israel, and given to a nation to produce its fruit. That's a repentant generation of Israel at the second coming. So in the meantime, from Matthew 12's rejection all the way through the church age, all the way through the 7-year tribulation, we have what's going on in this parable here. The parable of the wheat and the tares. Or some say the wheat and the weeds. The wheat is the good stuff, right? So let's look at that. Now, even though the application of this parable is much broader than simply the judgment harvest of Armageddon in Revelation 14, which has very similar imagery, the language of agricultural harvest is used by Jesus to describe his judgment on his enemies at his second advent and also the deliverance of his people called the wheat who go into the barn. And wheat going into barn is good, because the weeds are going to be pulled and thrown out. The chaff will be burned, as John the Baptist said. He'll baptize with fire. So let's look at the parable, which is in verses 24 through 30, then explained in verses 36 through 43. And I got to do this quick. So 13:24, Jesus presented another parable to them. So he's been rejected. The kingdom is not going to come now. It'll come later. It's not installed. He didn't say, here's part of it. I'm going to completely 100% postpone it. And it comes back when I return and then establish it. By the way, he doesn't establish it. People think when Jesus comes to the Mount of Olives, he came from heaven and went, bam. It doesn't say that. It says he'll return to the Mount of Olives, but there's an 8th stage of that Armageddon campaign. I mean, the armies of the Antichrist, stage 1, set up for battle. And then Babylon's destroyed, stage 2. Then the armies of Antichrist come south to go to Jerusalem. The Jews will then call on the name of the Lord as saved people, and Jesus returns. And then he makes his ascent up. He goes to the valley of Jehoshaphat, Joel 3, and then he brings Israel into the land. And when he does, he stands on the Mount of Olives, and it splits in two. Right? So there's more to, no, he just comes back once, like there's a throne on the Mount of Olives that he just lands on. No, he's got to go through that, and then there's a 75-day interval according to Daniel 12. What is that for? And then he's inaugurated king and begins the rule. So be careful. Sometimes the Bible looks real choppy, and then sometimes when you read in the gaps, you're like, oh, there's a little more going on in between. Don't ask me to repeat that. I don't think I could. We'll talk more about that when we get into chapter Revelation 16. So Jesus presents another parable, the kingdom of heaven. That's the millennium. And that's challenging, and I don't have time to go through all that. What are some of the difficulties with this? But the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. While his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went away. But when the wheat sprouted and bore grain, then the tares of these weeds came up and became evident too. So in the inner Advent period, believers and unbelievers will exist, right? Wheat and tares. The wheat is good, right? You want to be wheat. So the slaves of the landowner came and said to him, "Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? Then how does it have tares?" So who's the sower? I mean, the Lord sowed the seed. I mean, that's the parable of the sower, but he's still the righteous sower. He said to them, "An enemy has done this." Who do you think the enemy is? It's Satan. The slave said to him, "Do you want us then to go up and gather them?" Remember, Jesus will gather his wheat, but he said not now. It's not during the inner Advent period. He said, "No, for a while you are while you're gathering up the tares, you may uproot the wheat with them." Kind of hard to interpret, but he says don't do it. And allow both to grow together until the harvest. So throughout history, have there been believers and unbelievers? It'll culminate in the tribulation when the great harvest of Jesus with the sickle comes. "And in the time of the harvest, I'll say to the reapers," now, who are the reapers in Revelation 14? Jesus and the angels. They will help too. "I'll say to the reapers, first gather up the tares and bind them in bundles and burn them," so judgment, "but gather the wheat into my barn." The barn is the picture of the kingdom. Now, you got to jump down to verse 36. Let's look at the explanation. Aren't you glad there's explanations to parables? Sometimes there's not. So verse 36, and then sometimes the explanation, you're like, I'm still confused. Verse 36, then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the tares of the field." And he said, "Well, the one who sows the good seed is who? The Son of Man." Now he's going to that title, not Son of God, not Son of Mary, not Son of David, but the Son of Man here, because that's a title of judgment when he comes back to get rid of the kingdoms of man of Daniel 7 and then set up his kingdom, Daniel 7, 13 and 14, the kingdom given to him by the Father. So he says, the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. Okay, I'm done with that. I don't have to interpret that. He just told me it's him. And the field is the world. Isn't Satan the ruler of this world? And for the good seed, as for the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom. I think believers, and the tares are the sons of the evil, not just evil, but the evil one. Poneros in Greek as an adjective can be used substantively as a noun, the evil one. And doesn't the Lord's Prayer, I was trying not to say that, the model prayer of Matthew 6, deliver us from what? We say evil, I think it's deliver us from the evil one. And that's who this is, Satan. And the enemy who sowed them, now, is it evil? No, it's the evil one, because he says it's the devil. And Satan is the devil, the ruler of this world. And the harvest is the end of the age. Okay, this age, right? Revelation 14, we're almost at the end of the tribulation. The harvest is about to come. And the end of this age is this present age. And then what did Jesus say in Matthew 12? This age and the age to come. The kingdom age is about to come. But at the end of this particular age will be the judgment. And then Matthew 12:32, the age to come will follow. By the way, you just have to look up Matthew 12:32 and you'll see the two ages mentioned. And then he says the reapers are who? Angels, Revelation 14. So just as the tares are gathered up and burned with fire, so it shall be at the end of the age. The second advent of Christ at the end of the tribulation, that will occur. And then the Son of Man, here it is, verse 41, the Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they'll gather out of his kingdom all the stumbling blocks and those who commit lawlessness. Now, the kingdom will be established. He returns to earth, and this is basically saying not that the kingdom's now, but when he gets into the kingdom, remember the parable of Matthew, I'm drawing a blank on it, 22. Remember the parable of the banquet? And the guy that got into the kingdom without wedding clothes? Where was he thrown? Outside the banquet. How'd you get in here without wedding clothes, the proper attire? That's the idea here. When I come and establish or come back at the second advent, I want to start removing people. And there's a time of judgment, the sheep and the goats. This doesn't happen the second he hits the earth. There's a time gap between some of these things, and this has to happen. So he's going to start removing those who don't belong, those who commit lawlessness, he says, and they'll be thrown into the furnace of fire, and in that place there will be the weeping and gnashing of teeth, which is a description, I think, of the lake of fire and eternal judgment. And then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. That's what God's saying about this world. Have you listened to even modern day media, what they're saying, what's going on, and what's going to happen and soon if we don't get rid of fossil fuels? We're all going to die. And do they have a Bible open? Obviously not using that. As I said in the first hour, they're trying to now excuse student loans with college kids' student loans by using John 6. You're like, how are they using John 6? Well, Jesus multiplied bread and fish for free. It didn't cost him anything, so we should forgive college debt. That's really good interpretation skills. That's how people are handling the Bible. And they put it out there, and everyone goes, okay, I guess Jesus was all for that. And you read the Bible, it has absolutely nothing to do with it. So you got to study carefully. As I said in the first hour, if you read John 6 and you don't know the Torah, where the Lord multiplied bread for the Jews in the wilderness, where does Jesus? Gets them all out on the field, multiplies bread from heaven because he's the greater Moses. And then he starts quoting the Old Testament after he feeds them, going back to Exodus 16 with the manna and everything and saying, I am the bread of life. That's what that's about. So pay your debts, all right? So there's the kingdom. The righteous will shine forth as the sun. We just saw that in Isaiah 60, where Jesus, the light, will appear and shine on Israel, and they will just glow in the glory of the Lord. So that's going to happen. Jews and Gentiles will be restored. So we're in that inner Advent period now. We haven't, in my opinion, the tribulation hasn't even begun. And by the way, what starts the tribulation so that you'll know it hasn't happened? The Antichrist must sign a covenant with Israel for 7 years. Oh, we're in the tribulation. No, we're in tribulation now, but not the tribulation, because show me where that covenant's been signed for 7 years and the Jews are allowed to go back and sacrifice on the Temple Mount. Hey, we're in bad times, but as Jesus said it, you haven't seen nothing yet. And that's an English Texan paraphrase. That'll be the worst time in history, never to be repeated. If those days had not been cut short, no one would have survived. But for the sake of the elect, they were cut short. So it's going to get much worse before it gets much better. And the much better is indescribable. Well, let's close in prayer. You know, a man led me to the Lord. Part of his ministry was talking about all the disasters of Revelation. And I'm hearing judgment, terrible times, then the lake of fire. And now I'm starting to think, how do I get out of this? You know, this is starting to resonate with me, and I know I'm a sinner. By the time I was 26, that was not an issue. Pretty much had that clear that I'm not good and good enough to stand before a holy God. My mom would have let me in. But next to Jesus' perfect righteousness, I know, nope, no way. Not when you put it that way. We're all in sin, right? All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. There's not one righteous, not even one. And I'm thinking, I want to avoid that judgment. So as we pray, let's pray about that. Father in heaven, we just pray if anyone's listening today, that they would realize that there is no one righteous, and that would include them. And that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That is everybody, even on their best day. When we come into this world, Lord, you have revealed that we are dead in Adam, dead in our trespasses and sins. And without Christ, we are without hope and without eternal life. But you have provided the only solution. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And Peter said in Acts 4:12, there's no name given among men under heaven by which we must be saved. And as the Philippian jailer said, what must I do to be saved? The apostles responded, believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, and thou shalt be saved. But Lord, what makes that possible? Well, we know you sent your sinless Son, who became true humanity. We know he went to the cross, bore every sin of all people, and every sin known to man, all at one time, on that hill on Calvary for that last 3 hours of his crucifixion. And he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And Lord, we know that you forsook him for a short time so that you would never have to forsake or abandon us forever. And when he paid for the last sin, he said, it is finished. It is done. It is accomplished. It is complete. And now we know, Lord, since he's done all the work, and then came off that cross and rose from the dead, the simple solution is to believe in him. That's all we can do. We have to come to him with the empty hands of faith because he's done the work, and we need to simply believe in him. As you say in your word, he who believes in him will not be judged, but he who does not believe stands judged already because he has not believed in the name of the only Son of God. Lord, we know Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life, and he who believes in me will live even if he dies. And Lord, we here today in this church, we believe that. And many of us and most of us in this room have believed it a long time ago. And at that moment, you saved us and you said, you are my sheep. I give you eternal life forever. It's forever, Lord. And you will never perish forever. And no one will pluck you out of my hand. So Lord, we thank you that we're in the grip of the Lamb and the eternal grip of Jesus. And if he's God, then he's omnipotent and nothing can separate us from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. So Lord, I pray the gospel continues to go out, that people will believe it, become permanent children of God at the moment they believe, and then go out and represent Jesus in the time they have on earth. And Lord, we don't know how long each of us has, but we would do that well, sharing the good news of Jesus, loving our brethren in the church, because you said the world will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. And Lord, protect the churches that stand for you and the missionaries that preach your word and those who represent you. And Lord, continue to allow us to come together to worship you. In Jesus we pray. Amen.